Okay, so shh. I need us quiet, please. All right, so before we keep moving forward, I want to review the big idea from Friday again because I know that this is a big thing and it can be challenging to remember which is which because there's no good way to remember. It's just something you have to do enough that you can remember. So, strata versus cluster. The manager of a sports arena wants to learn more about the financial status of the people who are attending the NBA basketball games. He'd like to give a survey to a representative sample of the more than 20,000 fans in attendance. Ticket prices for the game vary a great deal. Seats near the court cost over $100 each, while seats in the top row of the arena cost $25 each. The arena is divided into 30 numbered sections from 101 to 130. Each section has a row of seats labeled with letters A nearest to the court to ZZ, which is the top of the arena. Which would be a better way to take a stratified sample of fans, using the lettered rows or using the numbered sections as strata. So again, first of all, we need to remember what stratifying means because we learned two different things on Friday: strata and cluster. Stratifying, remember, is where you split them up in a meaningful way, right? You think there could be a difference amongst your fans, a difference in their talks about their financial status. Okay, so thinking about it, what would be a possible indicator of the financial status? Just in the nature of the ticket they have, what could be an indicator of their status already? Okay, why? Yeah. So do we agree the price of the ticket, that could have an impact on their financial status, right? People that make more money might be more willing to pay for a more expensive ticket. People that don't make as much money would probably want the cheaper ticket so they can still go enjoy the game without having to spend 4 times as much money. So here we want to focus on that idea that their ticket price could be causing a difference in their responses or could inherently have a difference in their responses. Did everybody agree with that? Yeah. So if we're going to stratify based on the ticket price, okay, and Bart, you kind of already alluded to this, what would be a good way to create strata? Based on their letter or based on the section that they're in? Which is a way that we could stratify that based on ticket price? The letter, yeah. Because wouldn't letter A be the most expensive? That's closest all the way back, and then ZZ would be the least expensive. So here, I think if we're making strata, I think we would make the strata based on the letter designation. Okay, A all the way up through ZZ. Okay, because again, that is how the price. You can follow the price pretty easily following those letters. A is going to be the most expensive, going all the way back to ZZ, which is the least expensive. All right, so now let's talk about the other way. So stratifying is where you break them up with a purpose, right? In a meaningful way, you break them up because you think there are inherent differences within your population. cluster. So remember, isn't cluster me creating just a miniature version of the population, right? So I create little mini populations. I group them up because then that can make it easier to do my survey because all I have to do is say, all right, I have this cluster, randomly select 2 whole clusters. Everyone there gets my sample. So here we already talked about in part A that one difference we believe could be ticket price, right? So we can find a way to divvy these up into mini populations that every ticket price is represented. We could make clusters out of this. Now, if we look at the 2 ways, using the lettered rows or the numbered sections, which one would have a good representation of all of those ticket prices? The sections, right? Because that section is going to be a chunk of all of them. A through ZZ will be represented within each section, right? So you could justify that each of those sections could represent just a mini population. You hear me say that all the time talking about clusters, but that's a good way to think about it, okay? So if we use a section, every ticket price will be represented there, so that would be a good just miniature version of the population that we're wondering about. All right, so the new stuff for today. So again, big picture, we're trying to use this to move in the direction of statistical inferencing. Okay, and again, what that means is taking a sample, using that data that we collect to make inferences, to make conclusions about the bigger population. So we rely on random sampling for a couple things in that process. One, randomizing helps reduce bias in our samples. Okay, so that's why we've talked about 3 good ways of sampling to try to eliminate that bias. Results from random samples come with a margin of error that set bounds on the size of error. So even if you sample well, right, even if you sample well, your results are never going to be perfect. They're never going to be spot on. But again, the better you do, the smaller that margin of error will be. You guys have seen political polls, right? Where it's like one candidate may have 40% of the votes plus or minus 2%. Again, the better you sample, the smaller you can make that margin of error. Okay? Inherently, the larger the samples, hopefully the better the information you're getting, right? So you'll also see the larger the sample, again, you're getting better information. That is also going to reduce some of that error that we're going to see, okay? So again, we've spent a couple of days already talking about good sampling methods, poor sampling methods. So we do have some more vocab to go over today of just some more types of biases, okay? What types of biases can affect our results, our samples? So here are 4 more that we're going to add to our list. We've already talked about convenience and voluntary response, right? We talked about the biases that those can create. So again, here's a couple more. First off, undercoverage. So undercoverage occurs when some groups in the population are left out of the process of choosing the sample. So does you have a piece of your population that the way that you sampled, you systematically don't represent them in your sample, okay? They don't have the same chance of being selected as other people. Non-response. That occurs when an individual chosen for sample can't be contacted or refuses to participate. You'll see this a lot with phone interviews, stuff like that. If it's difficult to reach the person or they just refuse to be part of your sample, that would be non-response. A systematic pattern of incorrect responses in a sample survey leads to response bias, okay? This can come in two ways, okay? Maybe they don't know the truth and they just give you something anyway, or they could be intentionally giving you false information. Okay, either one of those two things would fall in the category of response bias. And then the last one, wording of the question, can also have a big impact. Okay, if you phrase your question in a way that guides them to a particular answer, the answer you want them giving, again, that is introducing a type of bias into your sample. So, and again, I did put down here just so you have them all in one place. Do remember we also already talked about how these convenience and voluntary samples, those also inherently introduce bias into our results. So right now we're going to work through to see what's wrong with each of these scenarios. What type of bias could be being incorporated in based on the way that we did our samples. So first, school wants to survey students about their opinion of school lunches, so they randomly select students in the lunchroom to survey. Okay, so I want us to think of these types of biases that we're talking about, okay? What type of bias could be incorporated in the way that they did their sample? They want opinions on school lunches, so they ask students in the lunchroom. What type of bias could that be? Looking at the list that we have. Under coverage, because you're not representing people who choose to not have lunch there, right? If you don't like the school lunch, you may choose, hey, I'm going to go hang in the media center. I'm going to go somewhere else instead of going to the lunchroom. So yeah, I think this could be under coverage. How do we think that could be affecting our results? Do we think the results are going to come back overestimating the people who like lunch or underestimating the people that like lunch? Probably overestimating, because the people who don't like lunch, period, they're probably not even going, are they? Or there's a chance they're not even going. They're going to go somewhere else in the building. So here, that would be a good explanation. So it's not as easy as just saying, oh, this is under coverage. It does look better to explain a little bit and talk about how it could be impacting your estimate. Is it overestimating or is it underestimating? All right, letter B. A magazine wants to do a survey on what proportion of households in the town have a pet. They randomly select addresses in town and go door to door. If the person isn't home, they move on to the next house in their random sample. So here, thinking about their process, which bias could be introduced here? What? Non-response, because again, if the person isn't there, they're just willing to skip them. All right, we can move on to the next house on our list. All right, now let's think about the impact that could be having. Okay, so we're talking about surveys about pets. If you're ignoring people that aren't home, okay, they're out and about. If you again, this is just assuming, but it's logical. If you are a type of person, you're frequently out of the house, you're frequently gone out doing things, are you as likely to have a pet? Probably. No, you're not. And again, that's not saying everyone that's true for, but it's saying in general, we'd probably expect people that aren't home as often probably know they don't have the time for a pet and may not have one. So if you're skipping over those people, you're skipping people who may not have a pet because of that reason. Again, how is this going to impact your estimate? Is this going to overestimate or underestimate the people who have pets in this town? It's going to overestimate, right? Because again, you're allowing yourself to skip over people that should be part of your sample who may not have a pet. All right. An airline wants to know what proportion of people fly at least 3 times a year. So they have one of their attendants ask as they're checking travelers in. All right. So again, thinking of those types of bias. So they want information about how often people fly. So they just ask people as they're checking into the airport, okay, checking into their plane. So again, thinking of our list of possibilities, what type of error could we be seeing? I will tell you this one, you could probably justify 2 different answers depending on how you want to roll with it. I don't think that people have a reason to lie. I don't think they have a reason to give false information. The two that I could see is undercoverage, because aren't you not incorporating people who aren't at the airport at that time, right? You're not incorporating people into your sample that aren't flying. But also, couldn't you justify this is done out of convenience? Right? Wouldn't that be another thing, another way you could spin it? This is convenient, right? They want to know about people flying. Well, look, I'm at an airport, I have people flying. I'll just ask here where I'm working. So again, sometimes you could justify 2 different ones. And as long as you explain yourself well, you're good for either one of those. I think I chose convenience for this one. Yes. Because again, they're doing what's easy for them, right? Now think about it. If someone's already at the airport flying, let's think about what that could be doing to our estimate of the proportion of people who fly at least 3 times. Do you think if you're only incorporating people that are already at the airport, are you going to be overestimating or underestimating the people who fly at least 3 times? Over, because they're already flying once today, right? So again, you're naturally getting yourself closer to that 3. So yeah, so I say that you're likely going to create an overestimate with this type of sample. And again, just keep in mind, it would be acceptable to talk about an undercoverage situation here. If you explain yourself correctly, that would be another one I could see justified in this situation. A newspaper is doing a segment on drug use in high schools. So they send one of their reporters to go to a school and randomly select students to survey about if they have ever used drugs. All right. So again, thinking of our list here, which one would be possible in this circumstance? Response bias, right? You're talking about sending someone and asking in person, "Hey, have you done drugs?" Even if you have, are you likely to tell someone that in person, admitting to something illegal? Is that likely going to happen? Probably not. Okay. So here I think that is very likely this could cause some response bias. Again, the fact that they're doing an in-person interview about an illegal substance, people probably will not want to be forthright about that or forthcoming about that. And E, restaurants often put links to surveys on the bottom of receipts for people to fill out if they choose to. What type of situation is happening here? A survey at the bottom of a receipt. What type of situation could we be seeing? Voluntary response. Yeah, people don't have to do it, they can choose to. So remember, likely what's happening is you're getting usually the people with very strong opinions. Okay. Now in this case, it could be undetermined how that could go. This one is the most challenging to decide a direction for the bias. Um, so if they ever asked you for that, which again in this case is unlikely because it's hard to determine if it's going to over or underestimate. If you wanted to, you could say, if you got really good service, that's great. But if you got really poor service, you're probably more likely to complain. So you could be underestimating how people feel about the restaurant. But again, this one is more challenging to do that with. So I usually don't see them ask you for a direction for voluntary response. It's usually more challenging to come up with. All right. The final kind is wording of the question. Okay. So just inherently, how are you asking your question? Okay. So let's look at each of these. Um, so we want to talk about them as potential questions. Is the question clear or is it slanted towards a desired response? So here, which of the following best represents your opinion on gun control? The government should confiscate our guns, or we have the right to keep and bear arms. So is this a clear question? I mean, I think it's clear, but what's wrong with it? Yeah, how do they want you to answer? The phrasing they've chosen to use, what answer do you feel like this person is trying to get you to say? Probably two, right? That is your right to have guns, okay? So again, here it's a clear question. You know what they're asking you, but you can very clearly see that there's bias in the way that they've chosen to ask it, right? An easier way to be, couldn't they just ask you, hey, do you think we should be allowed to have guns or not? Wouldn't that be just a very clear, very fair way to ask it, right? So here, oh, I forgot. There we go. Again, it's just the phrasing of the question this time. They're trying to get you to say to. All right, B. A freeze in nuclear weapons should be favored because it would begin a much needed process to stop everyone in the world from building nuclear weapons now and reduce the possibility of nuclear war in the future. Do you agree? All right, so first of all, do you think this is a clear question? I feel like they're kind of rambling, don't you? They could make this a much more concise question. So I think not only is it maybe a little bit confusing because it just kind of runs on and on. Do you think it's slanted? Yes, because here they basically aren't they giving you their opinion and then asking, "Hey, do you agree with me?" Is that a good way to do a survey? Share your own opinion, then say, "Hey, do you agree with all these things I just said?" So I think inherently, obviously, they're looking for you to agree with. Oh, looking for you to agree with them. So again, this one is not only complicated, but also again, they are trying to guide your response to the answer that they want. On the bright side, so sometimes it pops up on the AP exam. How could you fix these biases? I mean, in some respects, this one would be pretty easy to fix again, wouldn't it? Couldn't you just make a more clear question? And honestly, most of the time, just comes down to making the question as minimal as possible. Here, you could just ask, do you feel like freezing nuclear weapons should be favored, stopping everyone in the world from building weapons? Enough, right? So for wording the question is honestly pretty easy to fix. You just have to kind of make it minimal what's in your question, right? Take out any opinion, take out anything complicated, and just make it its bare minimum. Okay, so again, pretty easy to fix these at least when we're talking about doing samples. All right, so a common form of non-response in telephone surveys is ring no answer. That is, a call is made to an active number but no one answers. An Italian National Statistical Institute looked at non-response to a government survey of households in Italy during the periods of January 1st to Easter and July 1st to August 31st. All calls were made between 7 and 10 p.m., but 21.4% gave ring no answer in one period and 41.5% in the other period. Which period do you think had the higher rate of no answer and why? Explain why high rate of non-response makes sample results less reliable. All right, so during one of these time frames, we had over 21% not respond. The other time frame, about 41% not respond. Which of these do we think occurred when? Given an educated guess. Again, one time frame was January to Easter, the other was July to August. Which one do you think occurred when? Really, nothing? All right, all right. Why might there be a higher rate of non-response in July to August? Yeah, because people are outside. People are on vacation. It's much easier to be out and about doing things. In the middle of winter, are you really out and about doing things as much as you are in the summer? Yeah. Oh, I was saying I don't want to leave my house in the middle of winter. So wouldn't it be maybe easier to catch people in this time frame? Here, you're right. They're on vacation. They're out and about. They're doing things. They're at the beach. They might be harder to reach, right? And again, explain why non-response makes things less reliable. Well, maybe the people that you're missing, if their opinions differ in some way from the people that you did get in your sample, again, that is skewing your results. So the more non-response you have, the more different you are possibly making your survey. All right, next one. A study in El Paso, Texas looked at seatbelt use by drivers. Drivers were observed at randomly chosen convenience stores. After they left their cars, they were invited to answer the questions that included questions about seatbelt use. And all 75% said they always use their seatbelt, yet only 61.5% were actually wearing seatbelts when they pulled into the store parking lot. Explain the reason for the bias observed in the responses to the survey. Do you expect biases in the same direction in most surveys about seatbelt use? So basically, here we're seeing 75% of people said they did, but in actuality, only around 60% actually were. Why the difference? Bingo, response bias. Because I know Minnesota for sure, I think every state has seatbelt laws, right? So in every single state, it is a requirement you wear your seatbelt. So again, if somebody is interviewing you in person, are you likely to admit to doing something illegal, doing something you know is wrong? Probably not. Okay. So here, probably in every case, wouldn't this be happening? Right? We'd expect a similar pattern on any surveillance seatbelt use because no matter where you go, it's going to be illegal to not wear it. All right. So to wrap up, I think this is our last page at least. Let's look at an actual FRQ. So this was given back in 2008. A local school board plans to conduct a survey of parents' opinions about year-round schooling in elementary schools. The school board obtains a list of all families in the district with at least one child in elementary school and sends a survey to a random sample of 500 of these families. The survey question is provided below. A proposal has been submitted that would require students in elementary schools to attend school on a year-round basis. Do you support this proposal? Yes or no? The school board received responses from 98 of the families, with 76 of the responses indicating support for year-round schools. Based on this outcome, the school board concludes that most of the families with at least one child in elementary school prefer year-round school. All right. First, what is the possible consequence of non-response bias for interpreting results of this study? So first thing, they're talking about bias, but they clearly indicate the kind of bias that's happening here. So that's why this vocab is important, because sometimes they'll guide you in the direction they want you going, okay? Rather than just blanket statement, describe the bias. Here, they're helping point us to what they want us focusing on. What do they mean by non-response? What are they trying to get us to say? What does non-response mean? They didn't respond. So they want us focusing on this idea, right, that we gave out 500 surveys and we got less than 20% of them back. Okay, so getting less than 20% of our sample back, are we going to necessarily trust these responses? No, because again, the big idea, you've probably noticed it in every one of my answers to today, every one of my descriptions. The biggest problem with bias is what if the people in your sample are somehow different than the people that were not sampled? In this case, what if the opinions of people who did respond are different than the people who did not respond? That is the kind of the general basis of of bias. Okay. So here, with such a small proportion of families responding, there's concern that there could be a difference between opinions of families that did and families that did not respond. For example, if families who support the year-round school were more likely to respond than those who don't support it, we'd be overestimating the proportion of families who would actually want this year-round school. So you don't have to, if you don't have anything specific to say in terms of what the difference is, that's fine. Just discuss that there could be a difference. Someone advised the local school board to take an additional random sample of 500 families to use and combine the results to make their decision. Will this be a suitable solution to the issue raised in Part A? Explain. So here we have this biased data, okay? So we take more data to combine with it. Is that a good or poor plan? Yes. Yes. So here, I agree, more is better, right? You're adding in 500 more responses, but you can't just cover up the original bias, right? That original bias is still going to be inherently in that data, so you don't want to use it. Okay? Once you have biased data, all you can really do is trash it, okay, and start over. So this is actually really tiny. I'll try to make this a little bit bigger for you guys. All right, finally, part C suggests a different follow-up step than the one suggested in B the local school board could take to address the issues raised in A. So here in their response, they gave two different possibilities, two different things you could do. Okay, one of them said that you could go back, you could fix that original data, find the 402 people who didn't respond, and actually go and get responses from them. Okay, so that's one thing you could do. Or probably the way I would have answered this if I had taken it in 2008, is I would have scrapped it completely and I would have tried to make a new sample. So what new sample could we do? Okay, I think they talked about mailing this, right? Was this in the mail? I don't remember how they said they contacted people. Oh, maybe it didn't say. Oh, it says sends. Okay. So by send, I would assume that means either mail or email, right? Maybe what's a more effective method? What? How could we get better results? Okay, we could go door to door. We could do phone calls, and then when we can't reach, we can follow up with. So basically, whatever you do, just should address the issue of making it better. Okay? So we can do a new sample with an alternative strategy, just as phone calls and in-person interviews, to try to increase that response rate. Or this top one is that first thing I was telling you about, where they said that you could go and fix the original 402 people you were missing from your sample. So you don't have to write both of these. You can write whichever one resonates more with you, whichever one you feel like you probably would have been, the way you would have answered it is the one that you can write down. I don't expect all of that.